Naoto was a second-year sad introverted loner whose genes make him a living girl deterrent, but his miserable existence changes forever when the smoking hot Nagatoro notices him and decides to dedicate her life to tormenting him with all the good stuff his whack genes deprived him of. Naoto was about to enter the library to escape from the torment that is high school when he heard the scariest sound known to nerds with horrible genes. Girls, he opened the door and was faced with his worst nightmare. A group of grade A 10s giving him the death stare, which was expected since he was the weird loner that liked to hide in libraries. After finding the courage to sit, he reminded himself of his hatred for the female species and how he would never associate with such creatures, as though a spineless weeb like him had a choice. Things quickly got worse for Naoto when one of the girls went to get a book from a shelf behind him and his bag fell, revealing his recent masterpiece. A creepshow manga series he drew about a down-bad version of himself that couldn't get enough of a holy samurai. The girls destroyed every last thread of self-esteem Naoto had and went off to mess with boys that didn't think drawing otaku-level comics was a good high school experience. One of the girls had decided to stay back. Naoto's abnormality had obviously intrigued her, as it was hard to believe that such a pathetic weeb actually existed. She teased him about his manga series and asked him to act out a scene that included actual physical contact with her. Naoto, who only knew how to touch his carrot, turned bright red at the thought of contact with one of the dreaded female species. He froze on the spot. She spent the rest of the evening taunting and teasing Naoto until he cried a river. She gave Naoto-kun, who she now called senpai, a boo-boo for his tears and left him to sulk in his misery. He had just been violated in so many ways by a first year and clearly just wanted to run home, where he spent the night haunted by the sound of her voice. The next day at noon, on his way to art class, which to nobody's surprise was also only used by him, his new arch-nemesis was there waiting to resume her torture on the relentless senpai. Once together in the art studio, she asked Naoto-kun, who was drawing a random object, to draw her instead. He spent a good couple hours tweaking in his trousers as staring at a girl that hot was uncharted territory for the innocent senpai. The fact that she kept teasing him and gave him a peek at her holy garments definitely didn't help matters. Senpai couldn't tell if he was in heaven, hell, or both at the same time. His innocent brain was receiving too much practical experience of all the stuff he only dreamt about and watched on the otaku site. She promised him a reward for the drawing, and that was all the motivation the starved Naoto needed. He drew everything except her thighs, as that image would have literally sent his brain into shock. After mocking him for it, she made him close his eyes for the reward. Naoto-kun wasted no time pouting his lips, expecting the smooch of a lifetime he had always wanted, only to be humiliated by her again. He ended up crying as the torture was clearly too much for him to handle, but luckily she had the boo-boo ready for the poor senpai. After school, it turned out they took the same route home, and she made good use of the opportunity to break Naoto-kun's soul. Somewhere along the line of enduring her torment, he admitted to hating her and wishing she would leave, but also enjoying the fact that he was talking to another human being who conveniently happened to be a 10 out of 10. He had experienced bullying like this since he was young, but receiving it from her somehow made everything better. He finally had the decency to ask for her name, and she formally introduced her beautiful self as Hayase Nagatoro. Senpai had just finished perfecting his latest masterpiece in the art studio when Nagatoro-san blasted in, showing off her ninja-style hula hoop skills. She asked him to enter the hoop at the right time. The humble senpai knelt down to find the right entry point when he caught a glimpse of Nagatoro's sacred armor and got violated by the hoop for being a no-good peep. Later in the cold, rainy afternoon, Naoto had just finished his meal and was about to enjoy his latest big boy vampire comic series when his hot stalker caught him off guard. His desperate attempt to hide his private treasure failed miserably. Nagatoro-san, who initially thought it was his usual Meliodas-style manga series, actually ended up liking the manga and tried giving senpai a little vampire roleplay experience. Naoto-kun went brain dead as Nagatoro climbed him, ready to sink her fangs into his Twix-sized neck. For some reason, he kept telling her to stop, but seemed to forget how to push her off. In between the weird cosplay, Nagatoro's hand somehow ended up on Senpai's magic wand. She gave it a little squeeze to be sure and sent an already brain-dead Naoto into a seizure. During the walk home, she asked him if his wand had never been touched before, and he somehow forgot how to speak. She almost made him relive the experience before running off, leaving Senpai to spend the rest of the evening daydreaming about squeezing the life out of Nagatoro-san's melons. The next day, she resumed her torture, which didn't surprise Naoto anymore, but somehow she managed to shock him again when she brought up a new game for them to play. It was basically both of them attempting to touch each other's melon tips with their fingers and getting a do-whatever-I-say card for winning. That meant you could turn the loser into your personal play buddy. After she violated Naoto's melon tips that were unusually hard, she thought the innocent senpai wouldn't return the favor, but he had other ideas. He was about to destroy her melon tips when Nagatoro-san, for some reason, started becoming as red as a tomato and ran away when she got a text reminding her to hang out with her friends. Later that day, Naoto was at his favorite restaurant, which was not close to his school to ensure privacy for his otaku comic drawing session, when Nagatoro walked in with her friend and two guys. Naoto hid from them and spied from his booth, expecting Nagatoro to torment the boys the same way she did to him, but she simply destroyed the creep shows with a coldness that made them run home with their souls left in shambles. Senpai quickly realized that he was Nagatoro's special science project that she especially liked to torture. Naoto-kun was having his usual peace-filled drawing session when the succubus Nagatoro-san crashed the one loner party as usual. She offered herself as a model for his next painting. Naoto politely declined and increased their distance to protect and fortify his mind from her diabolical evil. She decided to take off her armor of coverage and go full Adam and Eve for him. Naoto-kun had another brain seizure and was too blind to notice she actually had a swimsuit on and was just toying with his fragile mental stability again. At least he didn't cry this time. On their way home, it started to rain heavily, so they ran to try and escape, but Naoto's agility, which was practically non-existent, made them decide to stop and find shade. While drying up, Nagatoro realized that her clothes were soaked and more transparent than see-through glass. She told her senpai, who thought she had cooked up another swimsuit joke, and decided to turn the tables on her. He confidently turned to look and was frozen in time as what his eyes had seen disabled his nervous system. This only made his image in Nagatoro's eyes even more botched than it already was. After seeing that the rain wasn't going anywhere, Nagatoro invited him over to her house, which was close by, after he casually explained how far away his place was and became dramatically silent. Seeing her parents' shoes made him wonder what kind of diabolical parents would give birth to such an evil individual, and almost fainted at the thought of the torture he would experience from the whole family at once. She gave him a towel to dry up, and his senses went awol when he thought the towel she gave him was the same one she used to dry herself off. After spoiling his bathroom fantasies, they decided to play a game together, and Naoto-kun was happy he had a chance to finally defeat Nagatoro for once, as being a mid-level gamer was the one thing he had going for him. After smoking her in the first round, she resorted to using her God-given talent to fry his gamer brain, and ended up roasting him until he was charred and smoking. The next day at lunch, Naoto decided to eat in the dining hall, probably expecting to be alone and escape from Nagatoro-san, but as it turned out, he probably forgot that regular people had their lunch there and couldn't find a place to sit because the hall was packed. While scouting for a seat, Nagatoro called out to him and conveniently had a seat right next to herself. Naoto-kun was petrified because her friends, the self-esteem destroying savages that read his otaku comic, were also sitting at the table. He reluctantly sat and braced himself for roasting of a lifetime. They took turns degrading him, after which Nagatoro's friends teased their relationship, which she seemed to be okay with it until one of her friends touched him. She hit her with the death stare and continued teasing him until she tried to smack him. Nagatoro caught the slap midair and changed personalities like she had her personal version of Sukuna. She made it clear that Senpai was hers alone to toy with. Then the second friend, who seemed to have a thing for violence, called him a bug. Nagatoro began fighting a great invisible battle of clapbacks and death stares strong enough to counter a sharing an eye. Naoto decided that the best way to squash the beef was to put on the cringiest performance known to man in front of the whole school, boldly proclaiming that he was not Nagatoro's boyfriend, which obviously didn't surprise anyone. This demonstration made sense, as he was practically an expert in anything that reduced his value or dignity, after her friends pointed out how Naoto-kun didn't have enough balls to stand up for himself. Nagatoro decided to give him a private lesson on the art of being a normal human being. After teaching him how to karate chop anyone that dissed him, she violated his hair as a test to see if he had mastered the new skill, but instead noticed that she had violated his heart once more, as Senpai was using every last muscle in his puny body to hold back the fountain of tears about to spew from his eyes. After initially feeling bad, she turned up the heat and eventually gave him enough courage to initiate the chop. He was way off target and smacked her straight in the melons, which was definitely not his subtle way of fulfilling a lifelong fantasy. She called him out on his violation, and he denied any such intentions, like he literally wasn't dying for such an opportunity. Naoto-kun had just finished an oil painting and was washing his paint-soaked mittens when Nagatoro Nagatoro-san, who happened to get her hands sticky, also showed up to get a quick wash. Seeing the golden opportunity in front of her, she wasted no time getting into his head. She grabbed his lathery hands with hers and started massaging them like they were cucumbers that needed a little stroking. As usual, such intense stimulation was too much for Senpai to bear, and he ran off before blowing a fuse. Later that day, Naoto was having his lunch in the club room when he heard the door slide open. Expecting the usual torture, he braced himself for the worst, but had no way of expecting what came next. It was Nagatoro-san's friends. They had finally found his loner lunch hideout and immediately went to town on him. After clowning him for being a hideaway loner, they asked if he had any experience handling melons, a thought he could hardly stomach. Naoto-kun seemed to forget how to answer questions. Those were words he probably never used in his vocabulary, seeing how his reaction was a very clear answer of his lack of experience. They decided to offer him a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see what it was like to handle grade A lemons. With such heavy lemons bouncing closer to his face inch by inch, he just couldn't take the pressure and made a run for it. But once again, his Sakura-level agility made him easy prey. He was recaptured and forced to place his baby mittens on the divine lemons, his hands atrophied and seemed to stop working immediately after. The girls revealed they had buns tucked in their shirts, which made sense as they would never let a dweeb like Naoto handle their melons so easily, while they were having the time of their lives clowning him. His arch-nemesis Nagatoro-san came into the picture. She had overheard her friends discussing lemon-related activity with her senpai, and made them freeze in terror with her sharing in. The girls made a break for it, surviving to fight another day. Nagatoro-san, who was weirdly silent, was most likely planning to murder her senpai for becoming a top-notch melon master when he revealed that all he really handled were soft bread buns. This seemed to please her as she immediately went back to her usual self. She made him play a game where he had to squeeze the buns under her shirt to see which one was her softer premium bun and which one was the regular bun. While analyzing the first bun, the second one slipped out and the innocent Naoto-kun, who pretended not to notice this, switched over to what was supposed to be another bun, but was Nagatoro-san's divine melon. He went beast mode on her melon, carefully analyzing every inch of it with both hands and finally coming to the conclusion that it was softer. After taking a closer look, he realized he had just violated her and was assaulted with a bun before he could even acknowledge his actions. At noon, he was staring outside a window watching a baseball match, waiting for Nagatoro, who was supposed to model for him after making him decide to draw her the precious day. He almost gave up when she rolled in with a couch ready to model for her senpai. She noticed how much attention he paid to the baseball game, and after asking about it, he claimed he wished to be praised as much as the star baseball player Hosokawa. She told him that the fact that he ran away from any human contact was probably one of the reasons he had no one cheering for him. Maybe also because he was a talentless nerd who had nothing worth cheering to begin with. She told him to learn how to praise first before trying to receive. She clearly knew he had no idea what she meant and decided to make him compliment her. He put up a good fight, but was ultimately left with his eye twitching when she returned the favor. He decided to get straight into his painting session, and to nobody's surprise, spent a couple hours painting absolutely nothing, as he was getting too much visual stimulation from Nagatoro-san and just couldn't get a hold of himself enough to actually look at his model without becoming a human-shaped tomato. After much teasing and a couple more hours of brain shambling, she got tired and fell asleep, but promised him another reward if he actually did the painting, while hinting on how he could probably get the reward he actually wanted if he knew where to find his balls. Seeing her fall asleep seemed to calm his melting brain, and he finally started using the pencil he eventually finished, but was second-guessing showing her the painting as he felt it wasn't good enough, but she had already shadow cloned her way to his back and caught him off guard. She liked the painting and made him close his eyes for the reward. This time he felt something soft, something that couldn't be what he thought it was. She asked if he liked the taste, and he stuck out his tongue, probably expecting to have his taste buds sent to heaven. But as it turned out, he had just violated Rubber Fish Kun. She had used a torture technique that was too much for even Naoto, the great otaku. Like any other day, Naoto-kun was drawing any lifeless object he could find. Nagatoro came in to greet him with annoyance and torture, but unlike any other day, he didn't respond to her. She turned up the heat and he only got colder. Then her friends came in, knocked her to the side, and asked him to hang out with them, seeing as Nagatoro's torture had become too much for him. Nagatoro stared in disbelief and went into a seizure when he agreed with her friends, who had sandwiched him in between both of their top-class melons. Luckily for her, it was merely a dream, and the shock was enough enough to wake her. She was on the couch covered up with a blanket that Naoto had used to keep her from catching a cold while she slept. She didn't start off the day with her usual torture methods. The dream had her second guessing her tactics. She had started to get attached to her senpai and clearly wanted to keep enjoying his weird creepshow company. Instead of the usual verbal abuse she would use to start the day, she decided to tickle Naoto-kun after he claimed tickles had no effect on him. This was not true, as the mild session she gave him had him making sounds never before heard in mankind's history. She hit him with the swimsuit surprise, which still got him tweaked, and dared him to give her a tickle session too. When he built up enough courage to attempt to return the favor, she started morphing into a bright red tomato and chickened out. After interrupting his art creating session to show him a video of a sheep getting shaved, she noticed he seemed to be wolfing and offered to help cut his hair. After terrifying him with a razor she just had lying around in her bag, he finally settled on letting her trim it with a scissor. She was just about starting the makeover when she got a call from her friends to come pick up a book. Promising to be back in a minute, she left her senpai alone. The ambush was a success. Her friends had planned the fake call to get Naoto-kun all to themselves. Being alone with them again was definitely not how he saw the day going, and to add pineapple to the pizza, they saw the razor and had the most brilliant idea. They were going to turn Naoto-kun into a low-grade Saitama. He was easily subdued and held in place like the little twig he was. Luckily for him, Nagatoro heard the sound of the struggle for his life and ran to her senpai's rescue. The girls managed to escape from her Sharingan again and remained alive to fight another day. She finally gave him the cut as promised and actually made him look a little less disturbing. Later that day, on the way home, the sun was basically cooking them both. Nagatoro suggested they get shaved ice from a special spot she knew. Once there, her special spot had now become public property, as the whole of Japan had come to get some shaved ice. While pulling her senpai to find a spot in line, he suggested getting store ice cream and almost got annihilated for bringing up such a suggestion. After a couple hours of standing, Nagatoro-san's body fluids had made her uniform see-through and was putting on quite a show for the guys on the line. Naoto, who got jealous at the thought of other guys enjoying his precious view, blocked them and took it all to himself. After a lot of disturbing staring, he noticed Nagatoro was about to get a heat stroke. He grabbed her hand, finally taking the lead for once, and took her to a bench where he bought some cold tea and gave her to save her from a heat-induced annihilation. To thank him, she got the store ice cream for both of them and thanked him for the tea. On the way home that evening, they discussed their summer plans as their break began the next day. She was going to help the swim team, and he was finally going to catch up on his otaku series. He still had some tea left, which she took several huge sips from before returning it, getting his contact details and heading home. He was about to take a sip of his tea when the realization that Nagatoro's lips had been on the same tea made his brain lag. While slowly getting close to violating the bottle tip she texted him, turned out she was watching his creepshow activities from the corner and had caught him doing what he did best. A beautiful way to end the school season. Naoto woke up in a fantasy land and was greeted by a beautiful priestess that explained that he was the chosen one meant to free them from the demon lord. He explained that he was a useless simp who had no skills, and she responded by giving him a wizard staff to master the art and become a great wizard. She then proceeded to dump him from the heavens. He almost fell to his meaningless end, but was saved by the staff. Almost immediately, he was attacked by a giant iguana and was almost lizard food until a furry cat version of Nagatoro jumped in and saved him. They then journeyed together, slaying beasts and leveling up along the way. They eventually got to fight a mighty dragon, and after coordinated efforts, Naoto helped the furry Nagatoro defeat the dragon. The dragon then transformed into Fantasy World Gamochan, who was a friend to the furry Nagatoro. Yoshi was also casually hanging around the dragon's lair as some weird bouncy egg creature. Nagatoro gave him a kiss on the cheek for helping her, and they proceeded to the Demon King's castle to destroy him. Once inside, the three girls revealed themselves to be the great demon lords Nagatoro, Magagamo, and Magayosho. They mocked him for being a simp who fell for a simple cheek kiss and proceeded to chain him up, declaring that he would remain their toy forever. Naoto woke up screaming. He had passed out in the family restaurant where he drew his comics. Just then, Nagatoro, Gamo, and Yoshi came in. She saw him and asked what he was doing. He hid his drawings, claiming to do his summer homework. She was persistent on seeing what it was, so he made a run for it, but left one of his books that contained some of his special masterpieces. She chased after him, asking about the cat versions of her that he was drawing. He denied ever doing such, and she decided she was going to keep the book. The next day, he had just turned off his TV because they were talking about the beach, which was something he despised. Nagatoro called and told him to come to the beach, and being the beta simp he was, he followed orders accordingly. On the way there, Nagatoro and her friends took turns roasting him in the already hot sun. When they eventually got to the beach, the girls started taking off their clothes, and the sight of Gamo-chan's plot had him brain dead for a second. They noticed this, and Yoshi also decided to tease him by putting hers in his face. He had seen enough for the day and was going to get drinks for the group when Nagatoro-san, who seemed jealous, decided to give him a peek as well. Poor unsuspecting Naoto got another brain seizure on the spot. While the girls were swimming, Naoto kept watching in lonely solitude. Nagatoro, who must have pitied his depressing state, came to make him join them. She wanted to put some sunscreen on him and he stopped her, claiming that activities like that were for couples. She then proceeded to pin him down and use her feet to stomp the sunscreen all over his back. Gamo and Yoshi joined in on the fun, and this time Nagatoro couldn't hold them back. After soaking him in sunscreen, they got him to swim, and he was surprised he was floating. Nagatoro explained it was easy to float in salt water. They spent the rest of the day enjoying the ocean, having fun and eating ramen. At night, Nagatoro called to check on him. He admitted to having a good time and also snuck a drawing of Nagatoro while they were on the beach. After seeing a bunch of people wearing yukatas while out on a stroll, Naoto remembered there was a festival that night. He went home expecting to get a call from Nagatoro to make him go to the festival with her. He initially claimed to not want to go, but after sitting alone and depressed for a couple of hours and not getting any calls, he decided to head out into the festival, obviously hoping to run into his tormentor that didn't seem so harsh anymore. After a lot of hopeless gawking, he received a tap and turned around hoping to see his precious Nagatoro-san, but instead met Gamo and Yoshi-chan. His escape attempt failed miserably and ended with them putting a leash over him. At the swimming clubhouse, Nagatoro had just finished her workout when she got a text from Gamo-chan with a picture of her senpai on a leash. Naoto-kun, who secretly wanted Nagatoro to come save him from her friends, claimed she would never come for a mere picture like that. They didn't know that Nagatoro-san was a ninja-level athlete. She ran to their exact location in seconds and immediately tried to retrieve her prized possession, but Gamo-chan wouldn't give him up so easily. She had to fight for him, and so the gang went on a game-playing streak to see who would come out on top. Gamo-chan and Yoshi won, but Nagatoro bought Yoshi over with a special toy she liked to collect, and finally Nagatoro had her senpai all to herself again. After getting a couple of snacks, Nagatoro, who was clearly excited to be on a date with her senpai, had done enough teasing and wanted to see the fireworks. Naoto knew a secret path to a better view of the fireworks, and after Nagatoro got lost in the crowd, Naoto grabbed her by the hand using his weeb charm to make her oblivious to the fact that he had just pulled her aside into the dark woods alone. She was too entranced to know what was really going on. They eventually got to the firework, and while watching it, she seemed to realize what happened and started teasing him about his true intentions for bringing her there. But he wasn't going to sit back and be teased this time. He knew her weakness and decided to use it against her by asking for detailed explanations of what she meant by his intentions. Seeing the game he was playing, she decided to fight back and was coming in for a smooch that looked like it would end horribly for everyone involved. But then they were saved by a bright firework that revealed the presence of other couple that were hiding in the trees eating each other's faces. They both ran away forever traumatized by what they had seen. On the way home, while thinking about how much fun he had with her, Naoto decided to ask her out to the festival that would happen the same time next year, a request she was ecstatic to hear. She accepted and made him promise to come wearing a yukata. The summer break was over. Naoto-kun was coming back from a rather unpleasant day at school when he saw Nagatoro and her friends. There was an addition to the party, and before long, two jocks joined in after making multiple advances at Nagatoro, which she turned down. Naoto had seen enough and approached the gang. After taking his time to summon his inner senpai, he asked Nagatoro to leave with him. She was surprised but excited to leave with him, so did all the girls. They left the washed-up jocks to wallow in their collective misery and went home with the great senpai who had started being less of a total wimp. Nagatoro suggested Naoto-kun pick up some kind of workout routine as he was practically the same size as a fun-sized Twix. He said workouts were an unnecessary pain he didn't want to endure and would only do a workout that required no movement. The brilliant Nagatoro-san had an idea and turned Naoto into her personal donkey. All he had to do was kneel on all fours and have her sit on his back. Having her back door on his back was a dream come true, but his weakness made the experience almost unbearable. She had turned him into a horse when other students saw her riding Naoto-kun like like she was an expert cowgirl, and they both crashed to the ground in collective shame. The midterms were days away, and Naoto had wasted his time playing video games and was about to flunk his class. Nagatoro told him how failing his exams would mean they were going to be in the same grade the next year. This would have been a dream come true for the average nerd loner, but realizing that he would lose his senpai status, Naoto decided to go on a study binge. At the library, Naoto was trying to digest weeks of school in one fell swoop, and Nagatoro and her friends were teasing him about the horrors he would experience by failing and being in the same grade as them, or worse, failing twice and having them become his senpai. This new fear was something he would definitely never survive, becoming a full-time slave to his worst nightmares, serving their every need and becoming an overused toy. He was only saved when one of their friends revealed that Gamo-chan and Yoshi had makeup exams, which meant they were more likely to fail than anyone else. This leveled the playing field and made things much better for him. Somehow, he later managed to survive the midterms and would retain his senpai status. Later on, Nagatoro was walking past the club room when she heard suspicious sounds. The girls were doing something sinister to her senpai, something she had not even attempted yet, all three of them taking on her one and only senpai. She broke down the door and made them all freeze in place with her sharing and death stare. They revealed it was merely a splinter stuck in his thumb. Even that was too much for her. She immediately came to his rescue and pulled out the splinter. On the way home, she teased him for helping her friend carry some stools and challenged him to a rock, paper, scissors game to make the loser carry the winner's bags. She lost the first round, and he pitied her as she was clearly a sore loser. She won the second one, and after a couple minutes of torment, he decided he was going to turn off his nice guy mode. The third time, despite his desire for victory, he lost, and this time he was going to piggyback her the rest of the way. Somewhere along the line, she started slipping, and he pulled her up, grabbing her right under her sacred regions. She jumped off and ran all the way home with her face swollen and more red than it had ever been before. At night, after waiting for a text for hours, she finally texted him, and after a quick guessing game, she called him to reveal that she was in the tub. The mental images of her plot in the bathtub made him forget how to use a pen or write anymore. While laughing at his freakout, she accidentally hit the video button and his mental images came to life. When he told her what was happening, she almost had a heart attack, but later tried to play it off like she didn't really care. At this point, they were both too embarrassed and red in the face to speak anymore. Naoto couldn't focus on his drawings because Nagatoro had picked up an interest in boxing and was perfecting her shadow boxing techniques. Realizing she had the perfect subject to practice on, she made Naoto spar with her. After landing multiple hits and making the weak senpai trip, he fell over her, putting her in a clinch that seemed to make her forget everything she had learnt so far. Later on, while talking to her friends about their sparring match, Gamo-chan decided that she wanted to have a go with senpai as well. The other two also liked the idea and wanted to practice their different boxing styles on Naoto. Nagatoro didn't expect this and did everything to defuse the situation. She didn't want anyone else touching her senpai. She hit them with the famous "no boxing outside the ring" quote, but it didn't work. She ran to Naoto and asked him to run for his life, but it was too late. The death squad had arrived to take what was theirs, and Naoto's only line of defense was Nagatoro-san. Somehow he already knew it was all her fault. At noon, he was heading to the art room to finally have some peace and quiet and draw away his sorrows when he met Nagatoro and the death squad defiling his sacred sanctuary. When he asked them why they were not at their usual table, they revealed that a group of top-class nerds had made them leave the hall. Naoto was surprised that the death squad backed off from a fight, but they suddenly all went Sukuna mode and revealed that the battle was far from over. They had infiltrated the enemy camp and turned them against each other with their innocent girly charm and would get their table back in a week, while mocking men for being uncontrolled animals who only listened to their magic wands. Gamo-chan called Naoto the only exception that didn't seem to have a wand in the first place. This sparked a debate between Gamo and Nagatoro, with Nagatoro hell-bent on proving that Naoto was a top-class otaku who had collections of unholy comics hidden somewhere in the studio. They placed a bet of pancakes to whoever won. Nagatoro got to work trying to prove that Naoto was an evil scumbag like all the others, but after minutes of no evidence, Gamo-chan started declaring victory. Naoto then decided to risk his dignity for Nagatoro. He brought his latest edition otaku series from his clever hiding spot and made her find it, basically helping her prove that he was actually the king of uncontrollable animals. Later that afternoon, Nagatoro had walked in the studio and Naoto noticed she had gotten a piercing. He complimented her look and she decided it was time he also got a piercing for himself. But she was merely teasing him and only pinched the already terrified senpai, who clearly couldn't handle the pain of a piercing, but actually wanted to have one. Just then, one of her friends came in asking Naoto for his help. One of the gamer nerds she had toyed with had become a relentless stalker, and she needed him to pretend to be her boyfriend to scare him off. Nagatoro, who clearly became jealous, tried every play in the book to get them to cancel the plan, but was left in shock when he decided he wanted to play along. On the play date, Naoto seemed to like the idea of having the actual date, even having very vivid daydreams of how things could end up. The rest of the gang, along with a miserable Nagatoro, closely watched and followed them. Gamo-chan tortured Nagatoro with ideas of what Naoto could be doing with her friend. This eventually led Nagatoro to personally take out the stalker. After exposing him, they could finally end the play date, which was all she really wanted. The day ended with an evening stroll through the beach on their way home, where Nagatoro teased him on his failed first date. While walking together, Nagatoro told Naoto that she had some natural, carefully made, steamy snaps for him. His messed up brain went AWOL with 1,000,000 images a minute. She was actually talking about some freshly made chicken snaps and clowned him for having such evil thoughts. At school, the girls were watching the second years complete a marathon when they say Naoto Senpai, who was wobbling like a spaghetti strand in boiling water. On the way home, Nagatoro teased him for being a weakling that couldn't use his legs and opted to be his running coach. He immediately refused, trying to cover up his chronic laziness with a lack of talent for running. Nagatoro, who was fed up with his complaining, demanded he come out the next day for training, which he definitely did, seeing as a beta simp like him didn't know how to say no. The next day, they began training, and after a couple hundred steps, his lungs were practically imploding. He couldn't take another step until his eyes landed on Nagatoro-san's running suit. Knowing that too much exposure to such views would fry his brain, he picked up the pace and tried to overtake her. She quickly caught up, and eventually he gave up and sat on the floor, too weak to move a muscle. Nagatoro then named him the world's greatest wimp, and that was all the adrenaline he needed. A first-year student clowning and teasing him for being a weak piece of stick gave him the motivation he needed to finish the run. After the run, Nagatoro helped him stretch, as his stick-like body was unable to bend on its own. Using her first-year lemons, she pushed up on him and helped him become a yoga master. Yoshi-chan, who was walking her dog nearby, happened to walk past them and froze in shock at the sight of the yoga couple doing their stretches. At school, Naoto was thinking about his next portrait and was considering asking help from his president when Nagatoro walked in. She overheard his self-dialogue and offered to model for him, but he declined, saying he wanted a male model this time. He wanted to draw someone that he could actually look at without getting an aneurysm. Nagatoro teased him for not wanting to draw her, but drawing otaku-level cat versions of her in private. He then told her that she would have to come dressed in the same cat costume if she wanted him to draw her. He expected her to back off, as she couldn't possibly do that, but the next day she didn't fail to disappoint. Showing up in the most provocative cat costume ever, she gave him multiple aneurysms at once. While drawing her, she and the rest of the gang were discussing their various plans for the club festival that was coming up. When they asked him for his plans, he remembered his president, who had the art club prepare an exhibition that was a huge success, and decided he would likely do the same. The girls offered to help him get eyes on the project, and while they discussed, he heard footsteps that he recognized. He immediately hid the girls in the next room and was met by the president of the art club, a dominating C-cup queen that had left him in charge of the art club while she was absent. She came to confront him about rumors she had heard about him turning the art club to a high school club for the ladies. The table filled with bubblegum and snacks, as well as his recent portrait of Nagatoro in her cat costume, didn't help matters. She decided she was going to shut down the club, as he clearly wasn't taking his job seriously. Just then, the girls came to his rescue, and Nagatoro-san claimed he took his job very seriously. The president then challenged him to prepare his own exhibition separately. The exhibition with the most votes would win rights to the club. At the art studio, after role-playing as the president, Naoto reminded the squad that they were actually the no-good clowns who now had to face off against a 2-ranking art guru. The gang had to help Naoto come up with an idea that would stand a chance in the festival. After several not-so-student-friendly ideas, they were still clueless on where to begin. They were discussing the kind of art the president created when Naoto-kun pulled out the piece she presented the previous year. As it turned out, it was a one-of-a-kind, loser-attracting masterpiece that showed just how advanced the C-Cup president was. Things were much worse than they anticipated. Nagatoro was left feeling jealous after seeing just how advanced the president was in all aspects. The way Naoto defended her artwork only made things worse. Gamo-chan explained how Nagatoro-san's portraits were no match for the president's incredible artwork. There was a new melon queen in town, and she was definitely too much for them to handle. After her friends took turns roasting her and explaining just how little of a chance she had against the great president, Naoto-kun stood up for his girl. She then decided to sign up as his model and take down the president together. After a long montage of multiple failed attempts to create something that could rival the president's work, Naoto came to the conclusion that he had to face the battle alone like a lone wolf. Except that this wolf was particularly feeble and only knew how to draw apples. He crushed Nagatoro-san's heart with his brutal rejection. She ran off covered in nothing but drapes to cry in misery. Getting rejected by a top-class nerd who only recently learned how to run was definitely not the typical hot girl experience. Naoto went back to the studio the following day. The president had already divided the room between them. Naoto was practicing his fruit oil painting when the president came in and called him out for creating the worst piece of art to ever exist. Naoto-kun was too distracted by his C-cup queen, who was wearing nothing but a white drape and swinging her queen-sized melons in his face to even take in the roasting he had just received. While advising him on his art, Nagatoro came in to check on him. Seeing him with the uncovered president, she ran away, feeling abandoned. Sensing the tension, the president sent him after her to reclaim the love they shared, which to her was art in its truest form. He chased after her. After a lot of running, he caught up to her at the pool and caught her from falling in. He finally revealed why he wanted her to model for him. She was the embodiment of everything he found attractive. The power of the cringe was too much and sent them both into the pool. In their part of the art room, Naoto-kun had finished a series of paintings showing what a day in Nagatoro's life looked like. The former tormentor and toy duo were now giving off lover vibes. After teasing their love, the gang decided to scout the competition and see what the president was cooking. After infiltrating the president's art room, they saw something diabolical that sent the whole squad into seizures and had Nagatoro-san half dead. She had created an art piece powerful enough to overthrow kings. The team had to come up with a way to outdo the president. It was festival day and the exhibition was up. The president's piece was finally revealed, a piece that made her place as the Melon Queen to be sealed in the record books. She had created an art piece that could have detrimental effects on the great Meliodas, and without saying a word, there were hundreds of students flocking to catch a glimpse of her greatness. Naoto-kun, who thought it was over, was saved by his squad, who put on quite the feline show, attracting the masses with their clever dances and games that involved Nagatoro selling herself out to all the creepshow's boys at the school. Naoto-kun started to get noticed by girls who were genuinely impressed with his art and wanted him to teach them to draw, a feat that he had not even dreamt about. Gamo-chan asked the both of them to take a break while they handled the rest. While on their break, the jealous Nagatoro couldn't stop herself from teasing him about his newfound popularity, but was left blushing cheek to cheek when he complimented her for being the only reason his wimpy, nerdy self got any attention. After having an almost romantic lunch, they went back to the festival where the president's piece was being seized by the students' guidance council. She was brought in for interrogation. When Naoto saw she was about to be disqualified, he stepped in to defend her art, and after being backed up by the squad, the guidance council let her return to the exhibition. But she had already lost the battle to Naoto and ripped up the submission for closure of the art club. The girls then punished her by making her wear a bunny costume to work for them. Later in the evening, she met Naoto-kun in the art room where she almost fired what little brains he had left by trying to take off her armor in front of him. Nagatoro-san, who missed her precious senpai, came at exactly the right time and saved him from irreversible brain damage. The president complimented his artwork as well as his love for Nagatoro-san, which he was still in denial about. An announcement came on for a concert, and after asking her to go with him, they all ran off to celebrate their victory. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out this new one right here and keep laughing. Until then, see you all in the next one.